trials was a fundamental right with a long historical tradition and necessary for ordered liberty. The case overturned Apodaca v. Oregon and Johnson v. Louisiana. Justice Gorsuch wrote the majority opinion for the court, citing several reasons for affirming this decision. First, noting that this is a 700-year-old procedure currently practiced in 48 states. Second, explaining the racist origins of the non-unanimous jury laws and ending his explanation stating, quote, "We must accept that this right may serve purposes evading our current notice," unquote. Despite clear reasoning for the problems with the laws in Oregon and Louisiana, he failed to fully explain why a unanimous jury is better than a non-unanimous one.
Other cases and justices have further articulated the need for unanimous juries. Justice Thurgood Marshall added clarity in his dissent in Johnson v. Louisiana based on the ideas that the state must prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. He pointed out that the doubts of a single juror are evidence that the government has failed to carry out its burden of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
Reasons for unanimous jury include ensuring that all jurors have a meaningful vote in the deliberative process. For example, the Legal Defense Fund cited research in their recent amicus briefs that Black jurors in Louisiana are 2.5 times more likely to be in dissent of a non-unanimous jury conviction than their white counterparts. A study by the Northwestern University School of Law on real civil juries in Arizona demonstrates that a unanimous jury are not likely to be taken over by the eccentric holdout juror, but are more likely to produce thorough deliberations, and that the minorities are sometimes marginalized when the majority has the power to overturn them in reaching a verdict.
Due process of the law requires a set of procedures to be carried out by the government when a person's natural rights are going to be taken away. Putting the ultimate decision of guilt or innocence into the hands of strangers is a way to protect natural rights from infringement by the government. Article 3 of the U.S. Constitution listed a local trial by jury in criminal cases as one of the few enumerated due process rights. The Bill of Rights would follow securing additional trial rights, including public and speedy trials with impartial juries. Speedy trials ensure those convicted are still considered innocent, which protects and prevents them from being in jail for an unreasonable amount of time. These trial protections are checked against corruption and create a fair outcome. However, U.S. constitutional mandates for jury trials did not affect most Americans until the rights were incorporated by the 14th Amendment in Duncan v. Louisiana. Additionally, more than 90% of cases never go to trial, and according to a Pew Research study, juries can be emotional and easily swayed. Lastly, some civil trials are so complicated that juries are simply impractical.
It's hard to identify a due process right that is more embedded in tradition than a trial by jury. This right is directly linked to the founding principles of limited government, natural rights, rule of law, representative justice, and civic education and duty. A jury trial is an important aspect of the rule of law which ensures that when people's rights are at risk, they are afforded a fair trial. The role of strangers with no stake in the process is a protection against abuse of power. The founders wanted to protect against arbitrary government, leading to jury trials becoming an essential part of the scheme of justice and representation. They did so by carrying on the common law traditions of England, but made them written guarantees in America.
This civic responsibility also leads to civic education. According to Massachusetts jury education officer Michael Ryan, jurors are picked by random lottery and summoned to serve their fellow citizens with seriousness and enlightened self-interest. In the early 19th century, French philosopher Alexis de Tocqueville observed that serving on a jury helped to educate citizens in law and also build confidence in the legal system. In creating a check, Americans were also strengthening the legal system by building faith in law. For without faith in the system, there is no rule of law. Thank you. We are now ready for your questions.
Thank you. I wanted to talk about jury nullification. What role does jury nullification play in our justice system, and do you think it plays an appropriate role?
Okay, so I feel as though jury nullification has pros and cons. I mean, looking at the early history, jury nullification was seen as a good thing with the John Peter Zenger case, New York versus John Peter Zenger, which stated where Peter Zenger was not allowed to have prior restraint and publish against the government. But the jury saw that he was guilty and yet said he was innocent because they are trying to pave a pathway for a non-corrupt government. But for negatives, you can look at the Jim Crow era and like Emmett Till case. This innocent Black African-American man was brutally abused and killed. And then later, the three men that did this crime walked away innocent because the whole jury was 11 jurors that were white and only one that was Black or Latino. So there's pros and cons.
Yeah, to add on, well, and nowadays I believe jury nullification isn't as big of a problem we saw back in the day with the Jim Crow era and back during colonial America. Now, when jurors come to do their jury service, they have to take an oath to have any of their personal biases affect the verdict. So you don't really see the idea of jury nullification inside cases anymore, because you can see the judges can take out people who have biases, who say flat out that they will not be able to come to a fair verdict because they have those biases. So I believe that jury nullification isn't as big of a problem anymore.
So
Let me ask you a question, if I may. Given what you had said regarding the importance of unanimity with a jury, in those states where criminal defendants have been convicted by non-unanimous juries, do you agree with the position the court has held that it should not be retroactive? Or should they get another trial? What's your position? And please articulate.
I completely disagree with the case that said it would apply retroactively, which is Edward v. Vinoy, and the basis of it was Teague v. Lane. I completely disagree with this. I believe in Oregon and Louisiana, the people who were tried, you could say even days before the Ramos v. Louisiana case verdict came out, that if they got convicted on a guilty verdict with a 10-2 majority, that they would still have to sit in jail when 2 days later the Supreme Court case came out saying that you need a unanimous jury verdict to convict. So I think it's completely ridiculous that the defense's whole argument for saying that they don't want to retroactively apply it is because it would cost too much. In Justice Gorsuch's opinion, he said he talked about the cost-based analysis and about founders.
I completely agree with Abby. I mean, just knowing the facts why they had a unanimous jury, and they even said was because of racist reasons. So the reason for these racist reasons, and then not allowing to retrial people because of time, I don't care how long it takes. I want a fair trial, and I want all jurors to agree with me. I mean, Blackstone even said a verdict by 11 jurors is no verdict at all.
Yeah, and the only reason that they didn't have a non-unanimous decision is because the origins of Louisiana and Oregon, you see both states would intentionally choose jurors that would have that non-unanimity of having Black people be the majority. So their opinions are always the ones being oppressed.
Yeah, you just need
Let
some
me, would you go back? So you mentioned the Northwestern University study in your opening about, if I understood you, about what it is about unanimity that leads to a more accurate and fair result. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so this study was actually not a mock trial, which the majority of the studies were on. It was a civil trial. So I guess you can see that there's some complications. But the whole argument was saying that those who were in the minority of the verdict were always the eccentric minded and didn't really go along with the rest. But then in reality, in this study, it shows that the judge actually agrees with the minority and their opinion is actually reasonable. You can even look at right into the question. It mentions the movie, The 12 Angry Men. 11 of those jurors said that the man was guilty and only one said he was innocent. And in the end of the movie, they all said he was innocent. So it plays a role in realizing that the minority's voices should be heard.
And this study pretty much contradicts the whole idea of having a non-unanimous jury for the reason that there will be tons of mistrials because you'll have one pulled out juror who's being completely unreasonable and not listening. You can see with the Northwestern School of Law study that when you have one person in the minority or it's not a unanimous verdict, then those 11 or 10 other people have to listen because there's no way they can finish this trial without getting a verdict that is unanimous. So they have to sit through and listen and understand why they think a different verdict than the majority of the jurors.
So would you apply that to civil trials? Would you therefore require unanimous juries in civil trials as well?
I personally don't feel as though it's necessary because the standards are held differently because your life's not technically on the line. I feel you're not going to have a severe consequence for, I understand.
I know, you might get your house, taken away.
Yeah, I understand. But in majority of the cases, it's resulted in, because the main reason for not having unanimous jury is because of the time. So if the time takes up too much for civil trials, then I feel that I
believe that it should require a unanimous for civil trials. According to the 7th Amendment, I believe that there is differences between criminal and civil cases. With the idea of a preponderance of evidence with civil cases, it's just whichever side shows the most evidence in art, or shows the most evidence for what the verdict should be. But I still think that it's a trial, and like you were saying, if your house is getting taken away, I wouldn't want 2 people to disagree out of the 10 people that agree.
I want to shift gears a bit and talk about jury deliberations. For the most part, jury deliberations are kept secret. We don't know what's said in the jury room. Do you agree with that policy? Or what are the pros and cons of it?
Well, I definitely agree. I mean, it's looking back into history. I mean, with the Bushel case, this happened where William Penn was preaching Quakerism, and the king said that that was disturbing the peace, and they made the jurors say that he had to be guilty, or they locked them in the room and didn't give them water or food in order to do this. And this was a violation, obviously, of their rights. So the fact that the whole reason juries are here is a check against the government, and for the government or anyone to hear what was going on in the deliberative process would be a clear violation of this. I mean, it was so important that the founders put in the Article 3, Section 2 of and Clause 3 of the amendment, and made 3 amendment processes: 5th Amendment, 6th Amendment, and 7th Amendment. So yeah, I definitely think that it should be secretive.
I also agree with my colleague Maria. I believe that they should, their deliberation should be secret, just for like the jurors' sake as well. You can see in high-profile cases that become very publicized. You can see in a case like the Trayvon Martin case that when the jurors came to their controversial not guilty decision, that the jurors were getting death threats from all these verdicts. So I believe it would have just came out. The death threats would have been intensified, and all the harmful stuff coming their way would have been intensified if their deliberations come out, because like people who see the case are just looking through the social media aspect. They aren't seeing the case, and they aren't seeing what's happening in a trial. So I believe for the jurors' sake, it should be kept secret.
And also, I just
let me sorry, interrupt your thought for a moment and throw another curveball at you. Most cases do not actually end up in trial by jury or at a bench. They result at the plea bargaining process. Do you think the plea bargaining process creates a disadvantage for defendants who should have a trial?
I believe that's a hard question. I really believe it depends from defendant to defendant. I believe it's as the defendant's sake what they want to do. You can see with a plea bargain, the prosecution brings up the idea of a plea bargain to the defense, and it has to be approved by the judge first. But you see with the defendants, that's almost like a safe outcome for the defendants. You're not rolling your dice with the jury and seeing the emotional, or you're not rolling the dice with 12 jurors who you will not know what they will decide. And you're also not taking a bench trial where you don't know what the judge will decide, because they could, based on the law. So I believe that they take that as a way to just provide a safe outcome for themselves.
I do have to add a different opinion on this. I think that the plea bargaining could be a sense of a way to catch the so-and-so bad guys. Because personally, if I feel as though that I was framed for a crime and someone offered me a plea bargaining, I would absolutely not accept, because I know for a fact that I did nothing wrong, and I have trust in my legal system with all the procedural due processes, that I feel as though that I don't need a plea bargaining. So I would just take the trial. So that's my opinion.
So I'm just, why shouldn't that be something a defendant should make up his or her mind about and be given the option? And maybe the result of this many plea bargains is that most defendants find that that's in their interest rather than going to trial.
Well, I believe it.
Go ahead, you finish, I believe.
Okay. Well, I believe it is a defendant's right. It's not, there's no constitutional anything in the Constitution or Bill of Rights or any lawful thing like that talking about plea bargains. So it's the defendant, they are voluntarily accepting the plea bargain. They are not forced upon it. They can voluntarily accept or decline it.
Thank you.
Oh, it's me. Sorry. It's been a long day. Thank you. A very nice job on your prepared remarks. You covered